Thank you, Chair. I'm glad to serve under your chairmanship, and I'm grateful to the Honourable Member for Jarrow for securing this important debate. The right to protest is a fundamental one that must always be respected. It's therefore extremely alarming that Colombian security forces continue to use lethal force against unarmed protesters. While we've witnessed widespread human rights violations since April this year, violent repression of public protest has been a constant theme under the government of Ivan Duque. Security forces have regularly attacked and killed protesters, but there's been little visible attempt to curtail their actions, and most abuses remain in impunity. Before its report last week found disproportionate use of force by the public security forces, the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights warned in 2019 that the use of force must be guided by legality, strict necessity and proportionality. Yet, just 4 days later, Esmed riot police killed 16-year-old Dylan Cruz as he ran from their attacks. It's so worrying that the Colombian government has already said it will not implement the latest recommendations from the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights on how to improve the policing of protests. Can the Minister say what assessment the British government has made of that report and its assessment of the disproportionate force during the recent protests? In September last year, police killed up to 13 unarmed people during protests following the killing of a man in police custody. Shortly afterwards, the Colombian Supreme Court referenced these killings and others when it was declared that the Esmed riot police systematically violates citizens' democratic right to peaceful protest, due process and freedom of expression. The army has also been responsible for the deaths of unarmed civilians in protests. In March 2020, 20-year-old peasant farmer Alejandro Carvajal was killed during protests over the army forcibly removing cocoa crops in operations which appear to contravene the 2016 peace agreement's prioritisation of mutually agreed substitution. Several other peasant farmers have been killed in recent years while protesting against military operations in their communities. In 2019, the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights called on the Colombian state to stop using the military in situations of public protest, while recommending an in-depth transformation of the Esmed riot police and independent investigations into its conduct towards public protest. Sadly, these recommendations are far from being met. Instead, Colombia's Inspector General recently opened investigations against opposition Congress members over their attempts to protect citizens from police violence after they'd criticised the Duque government's response to the protest. Last year, Transparency International warned of a concentration of power across Colombian institutions, which was blurring the separation of powers and threatening the democratic process. Can the Minister say what the British government will do to promote greater respect for the rights of people to protest in Colombia? And finally, I want to express my concern for the continuing targeting of trade unionists and environmental defenders. Historically, Colombia has been the most dangerous country in the world for trade unionists, with 3,200 killed since the 1970s. Since the peace deal was signed, 35 members of the Agricultural Workers Union, FENSUAGO, have been killed. We must start to see justice for these crimes. Rather than seeking to crush protests, silence the demands around the issues of human rights and peace, and target critical politicians, the Colombian government should be respecting its citizens' rights to mobilise and protest peacefully.